Just to go back to this interesting point about GCSEs being allowed, clearly to fast during GCSEs. Now, GCSEs are clearly a time which is a pivotal moment, for somebody who's thinking about a career move in their life. It's important to get good GCSE results, and then they go on to A levels, and then go on to university and do whatever they need to do. And there's been a bit of a discussion, especially with the recent paper that's been sent out there, with some kind of collaboration with MCB. Apparently, according to that particular paper, there are certain individuals, some controversial, who have made certain statements about schools and given some kind of guidance to schools. Mufti Amjad, somebody who runs 2 schools, GCSEs and Ramadan, fasting during GCSEs, very, very sort of important time for those individuals. Should they be fasting? What's the issue related to this? How should they be dealing with this issue? And the controversy that's currently existent related to this. What are your views? How do you sort of deal with this issue?
Again, on this matter, I've got, I've left some papers upstairs, but I've got a file full of papers which explore, file full of papers which explore the effect of fasting on cognitive performance, and also then on ability to perform exams and academic performance and things of that nature. The reason why I'm showing you this file is not to show off, it's just to sort of say that any work which is carried out by a scholar is done scholarly. It's not we just sort of stick our finger up in the air and think, I think we should say that the fatwa is that they should do their GCSEs and they should fast because this is showing weakness and whatever, and kind of this this mythical figure of a scholar that exists in some people's minds. The research that I've seen does not show at all that there is any impact at the times the GCSEs are taken. So the one GCSE is taken at 9 a.m. and the other GCSE is taken at 1 p.m., which normally finishes about sort of 2:33 p.m. Obviously, I'm giving UK times.
And the danger in that is it can have a psychological impact. If you're telling kids that you will be impacted in terms of your cognition, that could have a psychological impact. So there's a negativity even in stating that, isn't there, really?
That's a fair point. Absolutely, yes. That can have an impact where if you're told something continuously again and again and again, then it can build inside the mindset that by the fact that I'm fasting, this is actually having a negative impact. And sadly, though, this is the reality that we face within the UK, is anything which is a religious practice is under the microscope, and it's being challenged in many ways, not just, whether it's the young girls wearing headscarves in primary schools, or whether it's choosing to fast in secondary schools, or it will come up as well, choosing to fast in primary schools. So we're under this pressure, and schools feel it more than anybody else, because at the moment, the stick which the government is using is Ofsted in order to make sure things are going on, whether it's in makatibs or masajids or even in Islamic schools or madaris. So that exists, but there's no data to demonstrate that there is a negative. In fact, some have actually argued the case that there is a positive impact, particularly in week 3 and week 4, on the fasting individual. So they've looked at intermittent fasting and saying that there's actually a positive impact. And I've got the data here to show that. But yes, that's a fair point about the psychological impact of being told continuously that this is going to be bad news for you, this is not going to work. But it's not the only thing, as I'm sure you're well aware.
I've actually been approached by some quite aggressive mothers in relation to that. Why you ulama sort of stating that such individuals should be fasting, and are quite vehement about this, considering that it's going to have an impact on their exams. There is something else, though, isn't there, about the right kind of balance here, because, as ulama, there should be some kind of guidance that we should give to schools in terms of safe fasting. So from the perspective of safe fasting, and clearly, there are some kids who may be impacted in terms of dehydration and feeling very unwell. So what kind of advice should we give to those kind of individuals, or those schools, let's say?
Yeah. That's an absolute fair point. Going from, again, a Kosh background, in Kosh we say that if there's an item which can be replaced, we should replace it. So we don't use chemicals which are dangerous, they should be replaced. But where we have to use a particular thing, then it's risk management. At the moment, the efforts from the wider society or government is to actually replace these things. We're saying they can't be replaced, they are our identity. But you're right, there need to be some things put into place. Now, we do have an issue when it comes from non-experts, when it comes from non-Muslim scholars. So it's the Muslim scholars' responsibility themselves. I've seen something from Lancaster Council of Mosques, which looks reasonable, which tackles this very issue about how the risk can be managed, or potential risk can be managed, and what should be done in order to ensure that the child, or adult really, in our perspective, as we see anybody who's Balagh as an adult, we don't necessarily see them as a child as such, that this individual, this young adult, can continue to practice their faith, but at the same time also be safe, and that people are sensitive to the individual's religion. Sadly, this sensitivity towards Islam has been coated with this Trojan horse malarkey and the rest of this nonsense. So now schools aren't as sensitive because they feel this Islamification going on of state schools, which they're trying to now stand up against. But yes, I have seen the Lancaster Council. I've seen other material which I don't agree with, which give a completely different, watered down version of the fact of a person should be actually told not to fast and things of that nature. That's not a school's place. It's a school's place to advise. I appreciate they can sort of bring that under the wider child safety umbrella. But an individual knows when they're not well, and an individual knows when they need to break a fast.
Yeah, I think the other important point to put forward here is predetermining that a child is going to be unwell is not really something that we can really put into consideration here, because the intention should be that I wish to fast and I'm going to fast during the day. And clearly, if in that state they are feeling very unwell, and there's clear signs of dehydration and various other things, and that's the time where they should be breaking their fast, not the fact that they should making an intention not to fast solely for that reason that they have GCSEs, which is completely goes against the Sharia concepts.